Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the spring installment of our running lecture series. The running lecture series is a quarterly series of lectures related to running topics presented by the Drexel University Running Performance and Research Center. Tonight's program is going to be very focused on the Broad Street Run. Is anybody in the audience registered for Broad Street? Good number of you. Anybody running for the first time? Okay, great. So a lot of the information is going to be pertinent to that, but also to any long distance race. So 10-mile, half marathon, even full marathon, you're going to get a lot of information that you can utilize in those longer distance races. So our speakers tonight are going to focus on final preparation, race day strategies, and recovery from long distance race, specifically the Broad Street Run. We also have Carl, who is from Jenkintown Running Company and from, from Fairmount Running Company, has a table set up with some of the equipment, some of the gear that some of our speakers are going to speak about. So you can go out and talk to Carl, and he's a great resource for some information on some of those products. So our speakers are faculty members at Drexel University. They're going to focus on sports psychology, nutrition, and training for long distance running. The theme of the evening is 10 tips for 10 miles, but I'm certain you're going to get more than 10 tips from these guys tonight. They're a wealth of knowledge. So what we'll do is have three speakers present their lectures. At the end, we'll have time for questions. We also have a large number of people listening in on a live webcast. Those folks will be able to type in their questions, and we can relay those questions to the panel of speakers. We also have snacks outside, help yourself, and also some information about the Running Performance and Research Center. If you have any questions, grab me during or after, and we also have some information about some of the services that we provide out there. Okay, our first speaker is Nyree Dardarian. She's a registered dietitian. She's director of Drexel's Center for Integrated Nutrition and Performance. And she's going to talk about the role of nutrition in attaining peak performance and race recovery. Please welcome Nyree.
Hi, everybody. Okay. Is this good? Well, welcome. I'm glad you're all here tonight, and I am hi to everybody on the webcast as well. Glad to have you all here. So like Rob said, I am a faculty member here and also board certified in sports nutrition. And I am going to talk about some tips to get you through the day, like the actual race day. So we had a previous running lecture where we discussed more about how to train, what do you have to do nutritionally to prepare yourself during the training part. So now we're 2-3 weeks out from the race, and I hope that everybody is doing the proper nutrition needed for training. But now let's move into what do we do on that day? You wake up in the morning and you think, oh boy, it's here. This is the day. This is the first time I'm running 10 miles. How many people do you think are going to say that? I would. Okay, so this is just an overview of the top 10 tips that I have for today. I really stuck to the whole theme of today. So we do have 10 tips to go through. And this is an overview. I'm going to go through each one individually. Tip number 1. So we're going to start with where does this preparation for the race day begin? I'm going to say that it begins 24 hours in advance or the night before. That is the optimal time to consume carbohydrates. Carbs are good. Carbs are energy for race day. So at this time, since the race is early in the morning and you might not eat that much because there's certain timing that is really optimal for getting the most out of your nutrition for the performance, with an 8:30 start time, it might be difficult to do all that. So one way to ensure that you are getting the nutrients that you need, especially the glycogen that you need, which is the energy that you'll be using for running, start the night before. So eat a meal that's rich in carbohydrates. This is an example of what an athlete training plate would look like. So if you were an athlete and you wanted to, you know how you've seen the My Plate? How many of you have seen My Plate out there? Okay, so it basically is kind of, leveraging off of the My Plate. However, it's more designed towards eating optimally for performance. So they have a couple of different plates, and this one is a hard training plate or race day. And as you can see, 50% of the plate is full of grains and carbohydrates. And that's really what you want to aim for. You want to make sure that the majority of your meal, 60% of your meal, is carbohydrate that night before. Tip number 2, the night before again, because we're starting the night before, you want to drink enough water. You want to make sure that you're well hydrated going into that race day. You don't want to leave that into the last minute. However, I am going to caution that when I say well hydrated, I don't mean overhydrated. So you want to play that balance. You want to look at your urine and you want to make sure that it is light yellow, not clear, but that you are getting the optimal fluid that you need that night before. So just enough, check your urine, and the consequences, of course, of not getting enough fluid are really, they could be damaging and they can lead to injury, because what happens is it can lead to early fatigue, cardiovascular stress, increased risk to development of heat illness, because the water is what helps regulate your body temperature, and then also decreased performance. And with that decreased performance can lead to injury. If you're a little dizzy at the end, or you can slip, you can twist an ankle, you don't want to do that. So it also helps with avoiding injury. Tip number 3, don't run on empty. When you wake up in the morning and you're running late, you need to still eat something, because then your body is depending on other sources to produce fuel for it. But glucose is the best fuel for energy that day. And if you use other sources like fat stores that you might have or protein, you're going to be dipping into your muscle stores to get protein, and then you're going to be dipping into your fat. However, it uses a really not an efficient metabolic process to use fat as energy. On this day, you want energy readily available, pretty much at your fingertips, which it is if you consume it in the way of carbohydrates. So wake up early, which leads me to tip number 4. Eat breakfast. How many of you are breakfast eaters? Well, that's a good number. How many of you can eat and then run? Okay, good. I know that this isn't for everybody, but if you're really wanting to, maybe you're not racing against the person who has 4 to 5 minute miles, but maybe you're racing against yourself, right? This is the day that you really want to set your own personal record. Then you want to eat, you want to fuel up, and you want to make sure that you're getting the right foods in. So the best time to eat on this day is somewhere between 5 and 7 a.m. So it is important to wake up early, set your alarm, and kind of get your body into that preparation mode. And this is your big meal right now. Somewhere between 5 and 7 a.m. You want to aim for about 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate mixed in with a little bit of protein, and then some fluid. This is going to be the last big amount of fluid. And when I say big, that's really not that big. 15 to 20 ounces. We're talking about 2 cups of fluid in the morning before you head out. The reason why you don't want to be drinking that much later is because you don't want to have to be stopping, right, during the race and having to use the restroom. That is why it's very important to pay attention to some of the previous slides, which were the night before. The night before is really the best time to fuel up with fluid and fuel up with carbs. It sets you up for the next morning. But while you're here, I have this little asterisk there for liquid meal replacements. And the reason I have that there is because some people might be jittery, right? That morning, as you're kind of nervous, you have to get somewhere, you have to park, you have to get all your stuff together. How's this all going to work out? Maybe I don't have time to sit down and have oatmeal and banana. Well, in that case, a meal replacement supplement will do. Even a sports bar will do in this case, but something is always better than nothing. Okay. Tip number 5, don't eat too much fiber. So that won't happen, I'm pretty sure. However, I know my mom has told me that's what happens when you eat watermelon seeds, right? Doesn't a watermelon grow in your stomach? I think that's what I've heard. I've tested it, and I eat sunflower seeds at all of my kids' baseball games, and I don't spit the shell because I think that looks gross. So instead, I swallow it. I don't know if that's good for you or not. But so far, I'm okay in this end. But eating too much fiber on the day of the race can lead to gastrointestinal distress. It can make you feel uncomfortable. And on top of that, it can fill you up a lot and make you feel extremely full, which can then prevent you from eating at the other parts of the day that we need you to consume food and from consuming fluid as well. So we don't want fiber to displace your needs for these other nutrients. So try to lay low on the fiber. So this is not the day where I think, let me go back here. I have here peanut butter and honey on toast. This is a day that I would say go for white toast. White toast, white bread has more glucose in it. And probably has the same amount of glucose in it, but doesn't have the fiber to prevent the metabolism of the glucose or delay it. So therefore, it probably is a better option for quick energy. Also, when it comes down to the oatmeal, this is where I suggest instant oatmeal. Number one, it takes less time to make. And number two, it is digested faster. So I would go with those options instead of whole grain oats that morning or multigrain bread that day. Okay, so now you have, let's follow us through the chain. We started out with the night before. We're going to drink our fluids the night before. We're going to load up on carbohydrates the night before. That morning, now we're still thinking nutrition is on our brain because that's all we're really thinking about today, right? Nutrition? Yes, this is the day. So you wait. So then you think, I got to set my alarm. You set your alarm between 5 and 7. You have a good breakfast. It's full of carbohydrates. It has a little bit of protein in it. And you're drinking the last somewhat larger sum of your fluid for the day. Now you're there, you're in the mix of everything, and there's swarms of people around you. There's the people who are warming up right at the front of the line. They're the ones who are going to get finished in 47 minutes? Is that the approximate time? And then there might be some of us in the back that might be finished in 2 hours, maybe. So all different levels, and you're feeling a little bit nervous, but this is your last chance right here. 30 minutes before the race, when you're in all of this mix, and they'll be handing out a bunch of stuff, but this is the last time to really top off your glycogen stores. So you got up in the morning and you ate your breakfast, but you used up some of that energy because you drove into the race, you walked around a little bit, you hugged people, you jumped up and down, you warmed up. Now you want to top it off. You want to add just a little bit more glucose into your body just to fill those glycogen stores up to the tippy top so your body won't be asking for energy during the race. Now, this race is only about 90 minutes, right? Generally, would you say? So during the race, you don't have to worry about eating anything because it's not that long of a race. But you do really want to focus on topping it all off right before you start. You might as well be on all the way fuel tank, all the way up. Why even chance it just a little bit to the left, Mine goes to the left. So everyone does fuel tank, right, in their cars. Okay, so what can you do here? A little bit of a sports drink. That's a great way to start off. Put 3 to 4 ounces of that, perhaps. Or a sports gel. Remember, if you do consume a sports gel, it's a little bit less tough on the stomach if you drink some fluid with it. How about some gummy bears? Because really that's what it all is. You just want some glycogen. You just want some sugar to top off those glucose stores. Or like a piece of fruit, some jam and crackers. I like the jam and crackers, and I'll tell you why I really like that one. That's probably not something easy that you can pack along with you. However, the crackers do have some sodium in them, and the sodium there is something really good to just have electrolyte-wise with the amount that you might be sweating. It can help reduce cramping. So that's a good option. So you can go with something as simple as a few gummy bears to as not complicated, but more advanced as power gels. But whatever it is, this is your last opportunity, about 30 minutes before the race. Just top it all off. And then the run begins, then you're off. So what do? Do we need sports drinks at this point? Really, you don't need sports drinks. We're running about 90 minutes, like I said, but you do need to keep on hydrating. So how much? About 6 to 12 ounces of sports drinks for every, water for every 20 minutes that you're running. So about every 20 minutes, if you just stop off and get a little cup and drink it, that's about 4 ounces typically, get a couple of them along the way, it should be good. What it does is it decreases your time to fatigue. So the more that you can delay fatigue, the better you're going to be for a longer period of time. And then you cross the finish line feeling really good about yourself because you're not exhausted, you're not tired, and you really prepared your body well for these 10 miles. Okay? Number 7. So number 8. Tip number 8. You made it. Yay, you're crossing the finish line. You made it. Pictures are being taken, right? CBS News is there. Tell me how your run was. Well, I listened to my sports dietitian and I hydrated every 20 minutes and I feel really amazing. Everybody repeat after me. I listened to my sports dietitian from Drexel University and but you should feel really good at this point. So you're finishing you're crossing the line, you're getting your times. It's very exciting. And now it's time to refuel. And this is a really important time because at this time, this magical 15 minutes to really, I want to say 15 to 30 minutes after the race, that is the optimal time to consume protein and carbohydrate to restore glycogen and to repair muscle damage during the race. It is more efficient at this time, statistically more efficient to eat during this window than it is later beyond this window. That's why it's important to get it in at that time. Eat then. And then, and it's simple. It's not that much. It can be a smoothie. It could be a sports bar. It could be half a peanut butter sandwich. It could be a banana. It's not that much, but it's important to do this now because that also prepares you to start the recovery process. And that prepares you also to start running again later. Not the same day, probably not the next day, but 2 days later, it will help with that recovery process. So then what? Rehydrate. During this time, you also want to rehydrate. The way that we do it a lot of times in athletes is we want to understand how much you sweat. So there's a calculation, and we can weigh you before you race, and then weigh you after whatever the length of exercise in, and take into consideration how much fluid you consumed over that period of time, and then come up with a good idea of how much you sweat. Some people sweat more than others, and you would know if you're somebody who sweats more than others. Somebody who sweats more than others knows that when they look at their body after they've been exercising, they kind of have a sheer white coating over their body. So that's the sodium, and so that we would be more of a sweater. So you want to replace the lost sodium and you want to replace the lost fluid. But generally speaking, for every pound you lose during that length of exercise, you need to replace it with 24 ounces of fluid. So that's kind of like the calculation. Now, let's say you're not weighing yourself. Now, you could bring a portable scale. They have ones that runners use. No, they don't. But that wouldn't be a bad idea now, would it? We should patent that. Nobody out there in webinar, please do not take this idea. Okay, so you do want to rehydrate. So stick to about 2 to 3 cups of fluid after the race to rehydrate. And that's tip number 9. So after the race, is that what most people do? Yeah, you're shaking your head. So yeah, most people do. What are you shaking your head for? No. You don't know? Well, thanks for going in that direction, though, because that helped me out. Because most people do not do that after the race. In fact, most people might rehydrate differently. right? So you cross that line and it's a celebration. It's time to celebrate. The beer is there. And people have said things like, alcohol helps rehydrate you better. It doesn't. So actually, I understand this. You might want to have a glass of beer or wine after, but I caution you to please first rehydrate with fluid and refuel with protein and carbohydrate, and then move into alcohol, because alcohol can delay glycogen metabolism. So if you did consume some glycogen, it can interfere with that. It can delay rebuilding muscle and protein stores, protein synthesis, and it also can exacerbate dehydration. So that's not the first step. You definitely want to make sure that you refuel your body appropriately. You consume fluids to meet your fluid losses appropriately. You might want to throw in a soft pretzel there to get a little bit of sodium back into your body as well. And then consider having a drink of beer if you want to. But don't listen to the myths. It is not a recovery fuel. It is not. So those are my 10 tips. The idea is right now you're still in this phase. You have 3 weeks left to kind of move into what you're going to do for that big day. So this is the time to try things out. Try some of this. See what you feel like if you eat before you go out for a run, if you fill up with fluids, if you drink throughout your run, and if you refuel appropriately. Try out some gels. See if that's the way to do it. Try things out now, because you don't want to try them on the race day. So if they're handing things out to you that day, like a new type of a bean or a gummy of some sort, this is probably not. Save it. Put it in your pocket and use it another day. Try it out during training, but don't try something new that day. And don't always have to listen to what works for everybody else, because just because something works for one of your friends doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you. So you really need to listen to your body and understand what your needs are. And they may change every day too. So you have to kind of go with how you feel as well. Sometimes what works for you all the time may not always work for you on that day too. So have a couple of things ready to kind of combat that. So if you're not in the mood that day, you brought a backpack and you have some sports drinks in there and you have some gels in there and you have some gummy bears. Go with what you feel is right. If you don't feel like having those gels that day, don't do it. Go for the gummy bears. Have a little bit of orange juice. Try something that you feel comfortable with, and be flexible, because that you don't know what's going to go on. That's it. Those are the 10 nutrition tips. Are we going to do questions at the end? Okay, fabulous.
Thanks, Nyree. I'm still not convinced beer isn't a recovery drink. Everything else was great. Our next speaker is Dr. Kevin Gard. He's a physical therapist. He's a clinical professor in the program, as well as director of the Doctor of Physical Therapy program here at Drexel. He's vice chair of the Physical Therapy and Rehabilitation Sciences Department. He's also part of our team at the Running Performance and Research Center, and he does gait analysis with our group. He's going to speak about pre-race, race day, and recovery strategies from a PT perspective. Welcome, Dr. Kevin Gard.
So do I need to change this? Or okay, we're good. All right, I'm going to do this. I got this. So welcome. Thanks for coming. It's great to see so many people here, as well as on the webcast. I thought it might be helpful. So obviously, like Rob mentioned, I'm going to try and concentrate on the physical aspects of training specific to the Broad Street Run. And I was really trying to come up with things that are a little bit different in terms of, you can read a lot of stuff like in Runner's World, online, that sort of thing. But I wanted to try and explore maybe some different things, perhaps in this talk, things that maybe you haven't encountered, as well as cover some of the more basic things for people who are perhaps new to the race. And I thought where we'd start is to just cover a couple facts regarding the Broad Street race. Broad Street, I didn't grow up in the Philadelphia area, but Broad Street I think is one of those like classic races that happens in Philadelphia. Everyone talks about Broad Street race. You meet an awful lot of people that have done the race overall. It's considered one of the largest and fastest 10-mile races in the country. It's mostly considered to be a very fast race because from point to point, it is a net downhill to it, which doesn't mean necessarily for people are running it for the first time, you shouldn't expect to be going downhill the entire time. It goes up and down a little bit, but there are no big hills in it at all. And if you measure from the very start of it to the very finish of it, it, like I said before, is a net downhill to it. Weather-wise, if you look at the average temperature for the entire existence of the race itself, the average high has been about 71, but realize that's the average high for that day. And the races run at, I think, start time's 8:30 or so, so typically we're not close to that 71 at all. We're a little closer to the average low temperature, which is 51 degrees. However, I've run Broad Street a couple times where it's been down in that 50-degree range, but it's very, very humid that day, so it can feel much hotter than what it is, okay? So as we go through tips and stuff, I think it's important to understand what the weather conditions could be and understand what the variability could be so that you are just prepared for different types of conditions. You don't want to show up at the starting line with wearing clothing when you're expecting it to be 80 degrees and it's actually only 50 degrees. Likewise, you don't want to expect it to be 80 degrees and it turns out to be 50. So you just need to be prepared for those things. And it was 91 degrees in 2000. Hopefully that doesn't happen this year. In terms of the course itself, it runs from Central High School, which is just a little bit south of the Fern Rock subway stop, if you're familiar with that. It goes straight down Broad Street. It actually has 2 turns in it. The turns are around City Hall, and you end in the Navy Yard. So a good point here is if you're ever running on a street, you look up at a street and it doesn't say Broad Street, you have made a wrong turn, okay? And that's important to know because this does happen. There was recently a race that people actually ran an extra 3K in a 10K race when the marshal who was supposed to be there actually went to take a bathroom break and they ended up taking the wrong turn, okay? This shouldn't happen with Broad Street because, like I said, you should be going down exactly the same path all the time. But if you also find that there aren't runners in front of you or you're not on Broad Street, you know you've gone the wrong direction, okay? And the last thing here is recognize there is drug testing related to the Broad Street run. It's on their website that they will drug test people. So if anyone's planning on channeling their inner Ben Johnson, you should perhaps consider a different race that doesn't do drug testing, right? It's a tough crowd, that's a joke. Just kidding. All right. The 10-mile race, its distance itself, not a very common distance. You don't see a lot of 10-mile races themselves, but it's a really fun distance to run. An awful lot of people have commented on this. You know, comments that you hear, it's short enough that you can really run it hard, you can really race it, but yet it's long enough to brag about it to your friends. Not everyone runs 10-mile races. Bill Rogers, who's perhaps one of the most famous American runners, said, while it might not take as much, while it may not require as much training as the marathon, it takes the heart of a lion to race the 10, okay? So really, if you haven't ever run a 10-mile race, it's a really, really fun distance. I think you're really gonna find that you enjoy it. So let's get to the 10 tips for the 10 miles themselves. So the number 1 tip is regarding your taper, okay? If you're not familiar with what a taper is when you are training for long distances, the taper is a period of time, and generally the length of that taper differs depending upon the length of the race that you're going to run. So the classic is for the marathon. Normally the taper is 3 weeks or so, although there's a little bit variability. You see differences in the literature as far as how long that taper should be. And then for races that become shorter, the taper often becomes shorter, okay? But the purpose of the taper really is to cut down the number of miles that you're running, cut down the strength training that you're doing so that your body can recover from all the breakdown that you've put it through your training, so that you can increase your glycogen stores, you can repair muscle and that sort of thing, so that hopefully you get to the starting line in tip-top shape, ready to go, okay? What oftentimes people use the taper for is to catch up on all the training that they didn't do, okay? They all of a sudden, oh my God, you know, today the race is 2.5 weeks away. I really meant to train more than I did. So I really got to get out here and just start nailing it, you know, really start doing distances and that sort of thing so that I'm ready for the race, okay? If you do that in the race, realize that you will show up at the starting line with depleted glycogen stores, muscles torn up, you know, not in tip-top condition, and ultimately your performance will not be as good as what it should be, okay? Now, how long the taper is going to be, I mentioned before, there's a lot of variability in that. Some of the variability depends upon what the purpose of the race is for you. And what I mean by that is some people might use this 10-mile race as simply a training run. You know, they're training for a half marathon or a marathon later in the year, and they're simply trying to use this 10-mile race as for training purposes, okay? In that case, those individuals may not taper at all. They may do their regular training this entire week, show up on race day, run that, and then go right back into their training next week, okay? For someone who is, this is their first 10-mile race, or this is the race that they are really training for, generally a 2-week taper or so is perfectly adequate, all right? So that would mean that you're gonna do your last long run this weekend, and then you're gonna start tapering over the next couple weeks. So next week you would decrease your mileage. Normal rule of thumb is somewhere between 25 or 30% or so. And then the next week after that, you're gonna back off on your mileage a little bit more too, okay? Again, there's a lot of variability here just depending upon your ability and that sort of thing. But general rule of thumb is that you'd run no more than 7 miles if you're a pretty experienced runner the weekend before the race, so the last week before the race. If you were a little bit newer to the sport, that may only be 4 or 5 miles that weekend before, okay? The week of the run, you'll do a couple shorter, quicker paced runs. So you may do some faster runs of perhaps 3 to 5 miles or so. The idea there is to try and keep yourself sharp. It also helps build or burn a little bit of energy, because you're going to find over that taper that you have all this extra energy. You've been training a lot over the last couple of weeks, and all of a sudden you're decreasing that. So you all of a sudden find out you got all this pent up energy that you'd like to get rid of. When you do your last run, there's a lot of variability in this too. Generally, I do my last runs on Thursday before the race, and then I rest Friday, Saturday, and then I'm ready to run on Sunday. There's an awful lot of people that like to run on Saturday before the race and go out for a really short run that day. My feeling on that is you've got everything to lose in that little short run and very, very little to gain, all right? And what I mean by that is you could easily go out on that day, twist your ankle, tweak something, that sort of thing, and really compromise your performance on that Sunday. And that little short run, I don't think does very much in terms of helping your performance, okay? But again, you got to kind of find what works for you. And there's no hard and fast rules in this. You're not going to go find a research study that shows that running a really short distance on the Saturday before your race really helps improve performance, just like you're not going to find some research study that shows that it doesn't help either. So you got to kind of find what works for you. In terms of strength training, you want to start decreasing the volume of your strength training about 2 weeks before too. So decreasing the number of times you do strength training, decreasing the amount of weight that you lift, and then eliminate the strength training altogether about 5 to 7 days before the race. So that last week before the race, you really shouldn't be doing any strength training at all. Just be resting and ultimately getting ready, okay? You want to try and stay off your feet as much as you can that last week. I know that's nearly impossible for most people if they've got regular jobs, that sort of thing. But clearly the day before, if you can do that, try and find or engage in activities where you can rest, okay? Where you can be off your feet. Go see a movie, read, watch TV, that sort of thing. You're really trying to, let your body rest and recover so that when you get to that starting line, you're ultimately ready to go, okay? Don't be surprised in your taper period. People complain of aches and pains during that time. I don't know, Dr. Whitman might be able to speak to this, whether or not this is more psychological more than anything else, but people will report that they feel, also know, I feel this ache in my knee and that sort of thing. Just realize that's part of the normal process. We'll sort of talk as we go through this tips where you might become concerned about some of those aches and pains, but realize in the taper you might feel some of these. And most people report feeling a little stir crazy. I don't know if any of you guys remember the stir crazy popcorn popper and stuff. People, again, related to this pent up energy, they just feel like they've got all this energy and they feel like they're going nuts during this period. Some people will describe the taper period as being the most difficult part of their training overall, okay? And this is where it's important, focus on different things. You've done all your training, you've done all your running previous to this, so focus on different things, okay? Focus on, Dr. Whitman's going to talk about more of the mental aspects of running, so focus on that mental aspect of running. Visualize yourself running the race, how you want to perform that particular day. Find other activities to do. Start reading a book, go see movies, spend time with the family that you've ignored while you've been doing all of your training and that sort of thing, okay? And that'll help you ultimately get through this taper period. The taper period is really important. It is part of the training process, so you don't want to, just like you try not to skimp on any of your runs, you really don't want to skimp on your taper either, okay? In terms of apparel on race day, okay, realize these are races. It's not a fashion show, okay? So you shouldn't be trying to present a new you on race day in terms of the clothes that you wear, okay? My feeling is the apparel you wear, the training that you do before the race is also training for the apparel you're going to wear on race day, okay? So you should be trying things out as you're training so that on race day you wear things that you wore while you trained, okay? Because you want to know that those clothes are comfortable for you to wear that entire 10 miles, okay? And you know, you've experienced, all of you guys have experienced this before. You wear a new pair of shorts or a new shirt, new shoes, new socks, whatever, and there's a seam in them that irritates your skin. You don't want to find that out 3 or 4 miles into the race and then have to run another 7 miles or so while that thing is irritating you, okay? So that's why you should not be wearing the Broad Street shirt that they give out that day because you didn't train in it, okay? Wear that after the race, all right? Wear the clothing that you're accustomed to, all right? We get a lot of questions about compression sleeves. And when I refer to compression sleeves, I'm really talking about the ones that you wear on your calves and that sort of thing. You get questions regarding, like, do they really help performance and that sort of thing? The interesting thing, there are some studies in the literature that actually show that they do help improve performance. The entire story really isn't clear on them yet. We don't know how much they improve performance. We don't know at what distances they improve performance, but there are some suggestions in the literature that they do help, okay? But again, what I would say with these is if you haven't trained with those particular things, you don't want to go out and buy them the day before the race, the week before the race, and decide that day you're gonna try them, okay? I wouldn't even try them during your taper. At this point, if you haven't really trained with them, then you might purchase them and decide to use them for your next race. Okay. Number 3 is in terms of goal setting, and Dr. Whitman, I think, will talk a little bit more about this. I have just a couple of general things to talk about here. What I always do with my races, which I think works pretty well, is I always set 3 goals, okay? To me, running is a very, very cruel sport to participate in, and what I mean by that is your training can go perfectly well. You're hitting all the times that you want to hit. You're running the distances that you want to run, that sort of thing. And then you may show up on race day and it's 90 degrees, okay? Or it's extremely cold, or you just don't feel very well that day, or you just don't have it for whatever reason, okay? So I think that's why you need to be flexible and really choose 3 different goals for yourself that day. So the first goal is really I hit it out of the park day. Everything went right. I got at the start line, felt great, and I just felt great kind of as we went. Okay, so you set a goal for that. Second goal is sort of the okay result. Like, I'm pretty happy with this. Things didn't go perfectly. I didn't feel perfect throughout the entire race, but I felt pretty good. And then the third one is the tires fell off. Okay, a couple years ago, I used to coach for team in training. We went up to the Long Branch half and full marathons up there. We got there that day, and it was unbelievably hot, unseasonably hot that day. Okay. And we had to tell all of our participants that day, forget about those first 2 goals that you have. You were going basically for the, sort of the wheels fell off. The conditions are just brutal out there today. So you really have to ramp it back and try and go for that third goal here. Because if you really try and go for that top goal, just based on weather conditions, you're probably not going to make it. Okay. So I would have sort of those 3 goals in mind to work towards. Okay, a couple studies that I wanted to present to you too. First study on the left side looked at 123 runners. They put them into 7 days of Epsom salts. So I had them soak for 7 consecutive days in Epsom salts, not continuously, for periods of time during that time. And what they did was they had people run different distances and timed them. Okay, and they wanted to compare their time before they soaked in these Epsom salts and then after they soaked in these Epsom salts and see if they were different. And what they found was that the people that soaked in the Epsom salts, they decreased their mile pace by about 30 seconds. Okay. Second study on the right, they looked at 96 runners and they evaluated the quantity and quality in terms of brightness of the tape that they wore on different joints, different areas of their body and stuff. And they found that the people who wore the most amount of tape and the brightest amount of tape typically won the race. All right. So what I really wanted to get across to you here is if you soak in Epsom salts during the taper and you wear lots of brightly colored tape on race day, you have a really good chance of winning this race. Okay. So those are sort of some take-home messages I think you should think about, right? Now, obviously, this is not true. These are published in the Journal of Irreproducible Results, okay? And my point really to you here is there is a lot of advice out there, all right? You're gonna get advice from people you know, people you respect. You go on the web, look for advice, that sort of thing. And I think the thing you should realize is a lot of that advice isn't very accurate, okay? And I don't mean to like cause controversy here, but an example I'll give is think about barefoot running. Okay, and think about barefoot running like 5 years ago. It really sounded like the thing everybody should do. Okay, and today what we know is that barefoot running may not be for everyone. Okay, and we know that there are certain running types or individuals, certain foot types and that sort of thing that may not do well with barefoot running. There are certain people that do great with it, and that's fantastic, but there are other people that perhaps shouldn't be doing that. Okay, so you really have to take running advice sort of with a grain of salt and really evaluate it and figure out if it's appropriate for you, okay? And again, I would suggest this is all part of your training period too, where you're trying some of these things out to see ultimately if they work for you. And as Nyree pointed out before, I don't think race time or immediately before race time is the time where you want to start experimenting with some of this advice that you've got, okay? My fifth tip is really to follow your routine, okay? And I mentioned this a couple times. Your training is your routine, okay? So during that training, you've tested out clothes. As Nyree pointed out, you've tested your nutrition. So you've tried different goos, gels, hydration, that sort of thing, what you eat before you actually go out and run, so that you should have all of that worked out before race day. And from a physical training standpoint, you should have some idea of what sort of pace you're going to run too. Okay, because your training should have involved trying different paces, running at different paces, that sort of thing, to figure out what pace you can run that 10 miles at. Okay, so my suggestion to you, my tip to you, is to follow that routine. You've done all this training, you've tested all this stuff out. Now don't throw it all away. Make sure you follow that routine as you go towards the race. Okay. In terms of injuries and that sort of thing, I think we should spend a little bit of time here and give you some tips related to this. So most common running injuries that we see generally, do we have an injury here? No? Yes? Maybe? Okay. So most common injuries that we usually see, far left here, is related to pain around the kneecap. Okay. Second one there is IT band. Things like stress fractures, plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendonitis. Those are common running injuries that we see with people, okay? Now, if these injuries have happened before the race, you're suffering with an injury right now or in the next week or so, it's really important that you see someone as soon as possible, and best if you can see someone who has some experience in running, okay? Because generally, this big generalization, if you see someone who doesn't have experience in running, their answer is going to be, don't run, right? Which isn't a very satisfying answer to a runner, okay? So you want to see someone who's got experience in running, because oftentimes that individual has some tricks that they might be able to use. There might be braces, tape, stretches, exercises, inserts in shoes that you might be able to use that might help you get to the race and at least be able to run the race itself. Okay. Now, ultimately, realize the answer that you might get from the individual you see, even if that person has experience, it might be you can't run because the injury is significant enough. Okay. But hopefully that isn't the case. But you need to find that out as quickly as you can. Okay. And if you do need to cancel, it's not the end of the world. Okay. All of us eventually, if you run for long enough, will have to bail out of a race at some point. Okay. Because you get hurt or conditions aren't right or whatever. Okay. And there are plenty of races to jump into after that. And you don't really want to injure yourself more by running the race and then prolonging your injury and extending the amount of time that you're out, okay? If you get hurt during the race, realize there's medical personnel along the race route itself, as well as police officers and that sort of thing. So if you get hurt along the race, make sure you grab one of those people to get help. Some of those medical personnel will be out there and can help you with certain things. If you have blisters and that sort of thing, they'll have padding, Band-Aids, that sort of thing, and they'll be able to help you right there and hopefully get you back out on the race course immediately. If your injury is serious enough, they'll be able to transport you to the end of the race to get to your family and friends and that sort of thing, okay? Things that you should watch out for in terms of injury, either before the race or after the race itself. Sort of general rules of thumb here. If you have pain that's persistent for 3 to 5 days or more, pain that lingers on, generally that is concerning to us and something that you should go see somebody about. If your pain prevents running or it alters your form or makes you limp, those are things that really, really concern us too. And those are probably reasons why you should go see somebody and ultimately get evaluated, okay? If you get little aches and pains, everyone knows with running, you get aches and pains. It's just part of what happens. But if those aches and pains generally resolve within a day or so, we're less concerned about those types of things, okay? Tip number 7, crowd control. If you've never run a race before, you may not be familiar with how crowded it is at the beginning, especially a race like Broad Street. When I first started running Broad Street back in like 2004, 2005, there were about 7,000 runners who ran it then, and I thought it was crowded then. Now there's about 30,000 runners or so. And think about packing 30,000 runners into Broad Street, which isn't a very wide street to begin with anyway. It is very, very crowded, okay? Now Broad Street since 2004, 2005 has gone to the corral system so that they can control those crowds a little bit better, but it's still crowded. Okay, so at the very, very beginning of the race, you need to be careful because there are an awful lot of people there. I ran with a woman before, trained for a marathon. It was up at the Long Branch Marathon up in New Jersey. And within the first 10 feet, she stumbled over someone, fell down, broke her wrist. Her race was done. Okay, you don't want that to happen to you after you've done all of this training. Okay, so you just need to be careful, okay, as you're running. Oftentimes what I try and do is get to the outside of the crowd because there I feel like at least there's a little bit of room for me to move side to side to kind of get away from the crowd. But oftentimes in a race of this side, even those edges are a little bit crowded too, okay? And as we're going to talk about here in a minute, your first mile should really be the slowest mile of your race. So don't feel like you've got to try and jockey around all those people, pass all those people to get by them so that you can get going, okay? Generally, when you do that, you're just going to waste a lot of energy in trying to get around those people, and you risk you increase your risk for injury, okay? So don't worry about that. The middle of the race, the dead middle of the race is City Hall. So when you get down to City Hall, that's the 5-mile mark. Again, as I mentioned before, those are the only 2 turns in the race course. You go around the square that goes around the race itself. Be a little bit careful there because it gets a little bit bottlenecked there from people just turning and that sort of thing. So just make sure you're careful there. And at the very end, the thing I think, if people are here have run Broad Street before, I think you'll probably agree with me here. When you hit the stadiums and stuff, you start thinking, oh my goodness, I'm about done. That's usually where they're playing the Rocky music and stuff. And you think, oh my gosh, I have to be done here. It is still quite a ways until you get all the way into the Navy Yard and finish, okay? But by that point, the crowd should be somewhat dispersed and you should have pretty good open room to be able to run, okay? Tip number 8 is regarding perhaps you're feeling pretty good in the race and you want to be able to go faster, okay? Which is fabulous, but I want you to be able to increase your speed in the right way. And what I mean by that is oftentimes people think of if I want to run faster, I just need to take bigger strides, okay? Or I need to increase the distance that I put my foot out in front of me, okay? Which is really the wrong way to increase your speed. So the picture that's up here, it's a beautiful picture of a runner. You look at that and say, wow, that's awesome. However, it's also a really good example of the absolute wrong way to run, okay? Because that sort of stride length there where you're landing on your heel is been shown in multiple research studies. It's putting excessive force or large forces through your leg as you run, okay? This is displayed here, and this is from a study here that essentially shows the x-axis is time, y-axis is the vertical ground reaction force, which is essentially the force that's going through your leg as you land. And what you see at the line there is you'll see that for people who heel strike, so land in that position like that picture, the ground reaction force, so the force that's going through their leg when they're land is relatively high, and it goes up really fast, okay? And what we know with patterns like that is individuals who demonstrate that pattern have really high peak and loading rate, okay? And generally, because of those types of things, they tend to get injured. And the injuries they sustain are things like stress fractures and plantar fasciitis, okay? And we see this regularly when we do running evals with people. This is one of the more common problems that we see with people, that they overstride. And what I always hear from people is, I want to open up my stride that way because I want to run faster, okay? What we really try to emphasize to people is the way that you really want to run faster is that you try and increase your turnover, okay? So you're trying to take more steps in a given amount of time, okay? And when you take more steps in a given amount of time, you generally have a landing pattern that's closer to what's shown in this picture here, okay? So you can see the person's lower leg is perpendicular to the running surface itself. Generally, when you shorten your stride too, instead of hitting at your heel, you're hitting more towards the middle of your foot or towards your forefoot, okay? Now, what I'm not suggesting here is that if you want to run faster in this race, and you're a heel foot striker and you know that you all of a sudden change the way that you stride during the race, because we've emphasized here that you don't want to change things as you're running, okay? But the point that I want to get across to you is that if you want to run faster, don't do it by trying to make longer strides. Instead, just try and increase the pace at which you turn your legs over, okay, if you can do that. All right, and the other thing with running faster is I want you to try and do it at the right time, okay? And I've mentioned this a little bit previously, so you should really be thinking tortoise, not hare at the beginning. Your first mile should really be the slowest, okay? And then gradually, depending upon how you feel, you can increase your pace from there, okay? So miles 2 to 6, you think about trying to keep a strong, sort of steady pace, and you're kind of evaluating how you feel, okay? And again, with running, sometimes during that period of time, you might feel great, or you might feel like, I just don't feel like I got it today, okay? But it's relatively easy to still adjust in this range, meaning that if you feel pretty good, you might be able to increase your pace a little bit. I'm not quite feeling it as much. Maybe I back off a little bit, or maybe I'm just going to try and maintain this pace, okay? At miles 6 to 8, if you're feeling good at that point, I would say start trying to push it a little bit, start trying to increase that turnover, see if you can go a little bit faster. If you're not feeling so good, maybe you just sort of, again, maintain that pace. And then as you get sort of towards the end, miles 8 and 9, start using your arms a little bit more. Using your arms, swinging your arms a little bit more will generally increase your turnover and will help you increase your pace itself. And then towards mile 10 is that time where you want to push, okay? But again, keep in mind, you see the stadiums, you hear the Rocky music, you still got a ways to go, okay? So depending upon your ability and your ability to kick at the end, you may want to wait a little bit until you get closer towards the Navy Yard itself, okay? Number 9 tip is enjoy the race, okay? I couldn't find statistics on the percent of the population that actually run 10-mile races, because the 10-mile race is not as common, but the statistic for half marathon is 0.6% of the American population finish a half marathon. So my guess is that probably for a 10-mile race, it might be a little bit higher than that because it's just a little bit shorter distance. So it's not that many people, right? So you finishing the Broad Street Run, you've accomplished what most people, what most Americans will never do, okay? And you should feel really good about that, okay? As you race too, make sure you're looking at the scenery. You think, what's their scenery down Broad Street and stuff? It's actually a fair amount of scenery, including the signs. You'll see all sorts of different signs as you're going down. I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to make these out. This bottom one says, "I'm Rich's athletic supporter," which I thought was sort of funny. Toenails are for sissies, worst parade ever, smile if you peed a little. I thought that was kind of creative. Or run like you stole something, okay? But get involved, get excited about the crowd. You'll have people there that'll be yelling your name, encouraging you. Use that energy from the crowd to help propel you down Broad Street. And the last thing is really rejoice in your fitness. Again, there aren't that many people that can go out and run 10 miles on a Sunday morning, okay? You should feel really, really good about that accomplishment, okay? And then tip 10 is recovery, all right? And as Nyree mentioned, from a nutritional standpoint, recovery from a physical standpoint is really, really important too. It's part of your training, okay? Generally, what we recommend to people is that you try and keep moving. So don't finish the race and then flop down in the Navy Yard and and just lay there. Keep trying to walk, keep trying to move itself, okay? Later Sunday afternoon, go out for a walk so that you try and keep things moving. An ice bath often is helpful, as horrible as it sounds, and the way it sounds is really the way that it feels too. It's not a pleasant experience, but you will find that it is helpful in terms of your recovery. So ice baths, generally we try and get temperature down to around 54 to 60 degrees or so, which is pretty cool, all right? Generally the way that I recommend doing it is to get in a bath of cold water to begin with, and either have someone there who can start pouring ice into the tub, or have ice available that you can grab and put in there, okay? And once you get used to it, it's not so bad. You really just need to be able to tolerate it for 6 to 12 minutes, and it really does help. It does make a difference, okay? And generally what it does do is it helps just decrease the inflammation in your muscles, and ultimately helps get you on the path to recovery a little bit quicker, okay? Compression sleeves here might be helpful as well. So these are a little bit different than the calf compression sleeves that I mentioned before that you might wear while you're racing. These are more like compression socks that you might wear. Again, there's some studies out there that show that they may be helpful in terms of recovery itself. Generally recommend people do some light stretching and that sort of thing to help to loosen up muscles. People always ask how soon they can exercise. Again, this is a little bit variable depending upon what you're using this race for, okay? If this was your race, the first time you ran Broad Street, then you may not exercise, you may not run for a pretty good period of time after the race itself, and instead you may do some low impact, light bicycling, that sort of thing, just to be able to keep loose, okay? If this is just a race that you're gonna do in the course of your training overall, that you're training for some other races and that sort of thing, you may be right back into running. Okay. My biggest recommendation though here would be is don't forget the importance of recovery here, so that if Broad Street was your race, that you're going to race that, don't rush back into it. Your body needs time to ultimately recover. Okay. And then last, if you need help, please call us and let us know. We'd be happy to help you out. If it's to help recover from an injury, just some race day strategy, whatever it is, we'd be happy to do that. Okay. All right.
Thanks, Kevin. That's a lot of great information from a Broad Street veteran. Our next speaker is Dr. Sarah Whitman. She's a clinical assistant professor of psychiatry in Drexel College of Medicine. And she's going to share some sports psychology strategies for improving performance in training and racing. Welcome, Dr. Whitman.
Thank you. I think you can hear me. Very good. Now, I know you guys are all runners. You are not used to sitting for more than like 20 minutes. So sitting for 2 of these is going to make you like those aches and pains. So I'm either going to have you stand up and stretch, or just stretch, wave hi to me with both hands. I see you out there in webinar land. You do that too. Very good. Now you're ready for 10 sports psychology tips. If we know how to work this. Great. So why use sports psychology tips? You've practiced your running, your nutrition is in top form. So why do you have to know something about sports psychology? What I would say is you're going to be sitting on a 2-legged stool. If you only do the running and the nutrition, the sports psychology is really the 3rd leg of that stool. And it's going to help you perform better and enjoy the race more. One interesting research shows is that higher level athletes, and Kevin gave us some numbers, that running the Broad Street Run, you're getting up there in ability to run. You are one of the top athletes. That sports psychology can make the difference in performance if you think about high level athletes. So if you are in kindergarten, 1st grade, and you're playing, let's say, soccer, there's a soccer player out there. Just knowing how to kick the ball is going to be important. Getting in a little cardiovascular shape is going to be important. Once you get up to high school, college, beyond that, and certainly professional sports, the difference in those skills is really going to be pretty minimal for high level athletes. Research shows us that for the top athletes, their performance can be predicted 80% by sports psychology, how they use to recover from mistakes, how they calm anxiety. So the higher you get in your sport, the least difference is going to be in your actual playing your sport, in your running, and the sports psychology can really make the difference in your performance. Any Eagles fans out there? So we know, saying that top sports psychologists, top sports players are going to be about the same. So if we get Bradford and not get Mariota, we will be okay. So how did I come up with these 10 tips? I do not run the Broad Street. I don't run marathons, but I do some running. And after running one day, I just decided to dictate what are the 10 tips that I use day in and day out. So this was a 15-minute recovery walk, just dictating, kind of real-world things that you can use. So 10 miles, we'll get 10 tips. Here's the start, mile 1, the Broad Street run. What's tip number 1? Be aware of your thoughts, both leading up to the race and during the race. Be aware of what's going through your head. Watch out for thinking negatively. And this can be kind of anxiety thoughts. I don't know if I trained well enough. Is it going to be too cold for me? It can be, oh, I'm really not good enough at this. Maybe I shouldn't even be running. Really watch out for that and replace those kind of thoughts with something realistic, but more positive. So here's Homer Simpson. You see him running the Broad Street run. You can see his face, not too smiley and optimistic. What may be a thought going through Homer's head as he's running? Let's say this is mile 7, mile 8. What might he be thinking? I'm too fat to be doing this. What else might he be thinking? Never going to make it. So what, in thinking, those are pretty negative thoughts, what instead could he think? What would be more positive? I can do this. I'm going to finish. And even something about, I've prepared for this. I've listened to Nyree. I've done my pre-hydrating, so that you have a chance of success, to think more positively. So in addition to the signs, you may see some outfits. Here's one I really liked. So tip number 2, recognize signs that you're anxious. So in running, once you get going, you may have less anxiety, but in particular, as you're waiting at the starting line that morning before, when you're thinking about eating Nyree's breakfast, when you're feeling really nauseous, you may notice really some signs of anxiety. And if you think about different sports, a pitcher in baseball, when he has to really perform, can have a lot of anxiety, those kind of high anxiety spots. So using some relaxation techniques. And for most people, anxiety is either a lot of anxious thoughts or else physical symptoms of anxiety, like shallow breathing, fast heart rate, which for running is not going to be helpful to you. So I'm going to teach you a really quick relaxation technique right now. One of the most effective ways is just by using your breath and breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. One of the things we know is that out breath, the breathing out, is one of the things that can activate the opposite of your adrenals and anxiety. It activates the parasympathetics. So practice with me, breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. And see, you're already feeling so comfortable. So here's another one. So Kevin, if this person, should they practice? You don't want to change your clothes before the race, so they should probably practice in this outfit. Another thing you might say. So tip number 3 is to set some structure for yourself for the race. We talked about knowing what pace you're going to run at, knowing if it's going to be hot or cold, and all that is just to comfort you, to know that you're prepared for the race. Again, here's a picture of City Hall, that when you've passed that, yeah, I'm halfway, and give yourself motivation for that. Here's some signs that I like. Here's a grumpy cat telling you how awful it is. So while you're going to set some structure for yourself, and Kevin talked about this a little bit, you do want to be open to things that are going to happen. Not everything is going to go perfectly for you, and to be okay with that. Be flexible. Keep calm and welcome change. That something's going to happen. It's either going to be hotter than you expected. There's going to be maybe a detour. There's going to be a water main that breaks. Something's going to happen that you're going to have to adjust. And the more flexible you are, it's going to help you, kind of not get too rattled. You may certainly have, the pace that you want to run at, what time that you're aiming for, but you may wake up that morning with a head cold and just know kind of today's not the day that I'm going to set my personal best. And then just enjoy the experience, watch the signs, look for, your friends and family at the end, and just know that, it's an experience this time rather than I have to set a certain time. Here's another sign. A lot of work for that free banana at the end. So tip number 5, focus outward at some point. So towards the end of the race, your feet are going to get a little tired, you're going to be out of breath, and you want to be able to focus away from any discomfort. Some good ways to do that is to think about ways to distract yourself. This can also help you on training runs, that mileage you just got to put in, and to make it not boring, to be able to focus outwards at some point. So you may look at, on the run, the architecture on Broad Street. You may want to have music that is a distraction. If you're doing a lot of training runs, I love to run in Valley Green, but that's great to, look at the nature. So being able to focus on some things to distract you. So little motivational phrases, you just got to go. So sometimes you're going to want to look outward and really distract yourself. Sometimes you want to sort of focus inwards and really have some motivation for yourself. So what feels good about your running? Once you kind of hit your stride, the movement of your arms and legs, feeling good about your breath. What positive focus can you think about? That you have the strength to do this, that you can do this. So they're all the positive things that you can motivate yourself with. At the same time, so you're going to be focusing on the positive, but not to be afraid of discomfort. That you don't want to be able to tell the difference between what is just discomfort that you keep going with versus the pain of injury. Then you do want to stop. To know that is knowing your body through all the practice that you've done. For most people, you're also going to have the thought, maybe it's too hot, maybe you're getting tired. Your brain is going to be telling you, I just want to stop. And you can just say, thanks, brain, but I'm going to do something else at this point. So noticing that you're going to have negativity, noticing that you're going to have your brain telling you, just pull over to the side, you don't need to do this, but, I do want to keep going. Some more motivation. Don't forget the joy. This is the big reason that you're doing this, is to enjoy it, the joy of running. Tip number 7, plan how to handle what's mentally difficult for you. So for some people, it's really the anxiety is the biggest challenge for them. Some people it's boredom, some people it's discouragement. So picking, knowing what you're going to run into and having some ways ready to cope with that. So anxiety, you'll remember, I remember that breathing in and breathing out, that's a good way. For boredom, use distraction. This is particularly on, the training runs that you're doing. Have some ways to keep yourself energized and excited. Discouragement, that goes back to that tip number 1, being able to replace really negative things with something more positive. And I admire all the people doing the Broad Street Run, that you can give more and to really feel good about that strength that you have, that ability that you have. Also, tip number 8, plan how you're going to mentally handle fatigue and discomfort. You're going to experience some things that aren't so positive, on race day. So how are you going to do that? So focusing out using distraction. And who can tell me what this is? This is one that I have on my Does anybody know that one? Or woman? Does anybody know what commercial that comes from? Beats Audio, Colin Kaepernick being able to use that. So he has his headphones on and he's listening to You're the Man. And it's really about ignoring things on the outside that are taking you down and giving yourself some motivation and positive feedback for yourself. Focus on your motivation. So again, this is, mile 8, 9, you're starting to get tired, maybe your feet are a little bit achy. So what is your motivation for running? What's really going to kind of put you over that edge? I was doing a charity bike ride a number of years ago, and it's a 25-mile bike ride, and mile 23, 24, a little bit tired, and it was a charity for people with chronic pain. And most people with chronic pain can't ride a bike. So thought about that and really, I'm doing it for this people, and give you that extra energy to finish the race. Focus in, again, don't be afraid of fatigue, discomfort. You can reframe it. I'm out of breath because I'm being able to race. I'm doing really well. I'm running really fast. So thinking more positive about that. So mile 9, you're thinking about the finish, what you're going to reward yourself. So plan for some fun during the race. Use great music. Again, know what's going to be on your iPod that really gives you a lot of energy. Have your friends and family cheer around, mile 8, 9, 10 is going to be a good time for that. Plan a great reward. So after you've drank your water, then have a beer. So do something that's really going to, and massage, something that you're looking forward to. Sorry, there we go. Mile 10. So you can see yourself, replace that picture of that person with yourself, imagining yourself going over that finish line. Enjoy the race. So smile, promise me that you'll smile sometime during the race. We know that smiling actually, even if you don't feel happy, can change your physiology. So a smile can be very helpful. And one secret tip that I sometimes tell people when they're really struggling is, imagine this is the last time you could ever run. That might let you push away the things that are bothering you, your sore feet, the discomfort, and really focus on the joy of running, what feels so good about it, what is great to be able to do this. So what I say is the same way that you would not go from being a couch potato to running 10 miles, you're going to have to practice some of these skills, the sports psychology skills, to be able to really use them. And the same way that you want to practice, what kind of hydration works for you, practice that over training runs. You really want to practice some of these skills and see what works best for you, what works best for you for anxiety at the beginning, for tiredness at the end, so that when you're challenged during the race, you can really call on these skills to be able to use them. So you thought you were going to get away without having to do anything. So I want to practice just for 2 seconds right now. So here's the 10 skills that we went over. So you're now the sports psychologist. So I'm getting really nauseous that morning. I feel a little lightheaded. I feel like I can't eat anything for breakfast. What are you going to do that's going to help me? What would you suggest that I do? Breathe, okay. Always check in for your breath. Yeah, so doing some basic breathing, stretching, things that are going to relax you. What else might I do? Yeah, so do something that's going to take my mind off all my worried thoughts, and what else I can do. So it's mile 5, and I was really stuck on doing my personal best this time, and I see really people that I know that I wanted to run with, they're passing me, getting really discouraged. What might I do at that point? Okay. So that would be replacing those negative thoughts, oh, this is, really bad, with, something positive. Yeah, sort of going back to maybe using that third goal about, can't do this time. It's okay, I got to be flexible. Let me see what else I can do. So now I'm going to have you pick one, and we're going to do something, a little exercise right now. Because there's so few people here, and I want you doing it out there in webinar land also, that you have a choice of either going on the wall and doing, squat against the wall. You can come up here and do a plank, or a lot of my practice is pain management, so I know many ways to have people experience a little bit of pain. So I'm going to have you take your finger, if you don't want to do those other things, take your finger of your left hand and your hand of your right, and just dig your nail in slightly, no injuries. Okay, so now you know what you're going to be doing. I want you to pick one of these that you'd like to practice about how you're going to deal with the discomfort, you can really stop, the discomfort of doing that. So you may want to recognize anxiety, do some breathing, you may want to focus out, watch the clock, watch something else. You may plan for some fun after it's over. Does everybody have how they're going to handle that little discomfort? Okay, so I'm going to do it for 15 seconds. Ready, set, go. So I want you to concentrate on whatever your skill is. Press in a little bit harder now. Focus more on that skill so that you're handling the discomfort. 5 seconds left. Now I'm going to extend the time by another 5 seconds, so you have to go over. So I want you to be flexible, accepting everything that's coming, still using your skill. And stop, you've just crossed the finish line. So what did people notice with doing that? Was it easy to use a skill, hard to use a skill? Able to use a skill at all? So what did you do? Which one did you use? Breathing? Great. So you can really take your mind elsewhere. If something's unpleasant in front of you, take your mind elsewhere. Anybody else use a skill? Anybody over here? Any skills? Okay. So when I extended it for another 5 or 10 seconds, how did you handle that? Good. Yeah, I can do it. Yeah, that positive, I can handle anything. It's okay. So I would also invite you to, on your next training run, pick one of these and practice it. See how it works for you. To really, again, I can tell you these 10, but to have them in your back pocket is practicing it over and over. So I wish you got a lot of good luck. And remember to take your brain, take those sports psychology tips with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
For somebody who experiences nausea in periods of exertion, like a steep hill or crossing the finish line, do you think that could be related to nutrition, or is it training specificity? Like, is there something that somebody's eating to make them more nauseous?
You have any uses?
Did you say you're more nauseous when you are training harder, or when you're going up a hill?
Right.
But so you've been running fine, and then you hit a hill, and well, it could be the more strain that you're putting into it. So it could be like clenching down on muscles, I mean, nutritionally, I don't think that you could really plan for that by preparing on what you're eating before or afterwards, unless you had eaten something right before that hill. I think that it probably something that you might.
One thing I would wonder, not just for my own running, not so much sports psychology, but are you sort of towards your maximum with just the running, and then that's too much in a sense for you?
But when you start running downhill, you're okay again? It subsides.
Mm-hmm. It could be anxiety. I would imagine it's more something like the physical challenge of it. Do you get lightheaded at all? Or is it more just nauseousness? Yeah. So I would wonder about like too much exertion, your heart rate is too high. That would be a hypothesis. Maybe work slower up to that. Or if it's anxiety, you know how to handle it now.
Yeah, that would sort of be the interesting thing, is to play around with if you backed off a little bit and you took the hill at a slower pace, do you still get the nausea? And if you don't, then to me that would suggest it's more physical symptoms in terms of just the stress that you're putting on your body. If you continue to have the nausea, then I'd almost think it's more mental anxiety, that sort of thing, and then maybe use some of the strategies that Dr. Whitman talked about. And you would hope then, if it's the physical piece of it, as you train through that and get more accustomed to that, so maybe you mix in more hill work in the work that you're in the training that you're doing, then you'll start accommodating to that and you'll eventually get over that. Yeah.
Is there an average length of time between races or competitions that gives you maximum appreciation for what you've accomplished? In a certain sense, well, if I do a 10-mile, I can do a marathon, What was that runner's sense of jump forward?
I mean, from like a physical standpoint and recovery and that sort of thing, that's all over the board too. I mean, you hear rules of thumb like you should rest every 1 day for every mile you raced. So if it's 26 miles, you'd be resting for 26. Now we know rest for runners isn't really just laying around on the couch and that sort of thing. Generally, what they're talking about is you're doing a lot less miles. You're not doing difficult runs and stuff. You're not doing hill runs, speed work, that sort of thing. I have no idea where that rule of thumb comes from. It's not in any research study I've seen or anything like that. I really think it's probably, for lack of a better term, and don't take offense to this, an old wives' tale sort of thing, Not that you're an old wife or anything. And I think some of it's variable too, just like we talked about with taper and that sort of thing. It sort of depends upon what your fitness level is too. So we certainly know, I actually just talked to one of our former students today who's he's a fabulous runner. He's toying around with the idea of trying to do 2 marathons in 1 weekend. Exactly. That's what I said. What? I said, to me, that sounds like a great recipe to get hurt, So we certainly know like extremes like that is too much. What's the optimal time between those things? We really don't know.
For your first long race, would it be preferable to do, say, a half marathon versus a marathon?
Yeah, I think you can answer that from a variety of different aspects. And I think generally, yes, I believe that's true. Because I think from a training standpoint, even when you're training for a marathon, you got to be ready to run the half marathon distance to be able to do that. And I think Dr. Whitman can probably speak to this first. I think just from a psychological standpoint too, it's nice to be able to cross those barriers. So I can remember when I was training for my first marathon and getting up one morning and going, oh my gosh, I'm going to run 16 miles today. And while the physical part of that was tough, I think that the harder part about it was just mentally wrapping my mind around running the 16 miles and not defeating myself by, getting to mile 8 and saying, oh my gosh, I'm only halfway there.
I did the reverse.
You did the reverse?
Actually, I've run a marathon, but I've yet to run the half.
Yeah. Well, so tell me what would be your advice then?
I think so long as you train properly for whatever the distance, that's probably fine.
Some would argue you ran both. You ran the half and the full.
True.
Yeah.
I ran two halves, perhaps.
Is there a question over here too? Yeah. Hurry up, Rob.
As far as kind of loss of water weight post run, kind of what's I don't know really the cutoff, or is there a cutoff value like safe, unsafe levels of how much weight you should safely lose after
yes,
a run?
and it's by percentage of body weight. So safe is 1% of your total body weight. Unsafe is anything 2 or above. It causes fatigue, mental confusion. It leads to bad decision making, and overall just dehydration and the consequences that come along with that: overheating, increased risk for heat stroke. So you can prevent that though, because you prevent it by drinking during the run. So when those rules are up there, the tips, drinking, anywhere from 4 to 8 ounces every 15 to 20 minutes, that is there to prevent you from using 3%. If you are at above 3% of your body weight in water loss, that's a dangerous zone to be in. But there are studies that show that only 1.5% show mental confusion, and a lower capacity to even maintain running in a straight line. So those are things that you just want to kind of look out for, but you can prevent them by just drinking a little bit of fluid along the way.
Thank you.
Okay.